HD,
Howdy.
how are you, man?
Pretty good. How about yourself? You surviving the show so far?
I think my feet would disagree, but yes, I am. it's a good event. I have to say, your marketing team.
Oh, this is amazing. Yes,
Right?
this was genius. This was not
This
a
is
thing
cool.
you could buy. Put it that way.
This is cool. The location is cool, and I think people know you're cool, and the
Oh.
company's cool. So it's a whole round of coolness here. I'm thrilled to actually chat with you this time. I caught up with Todd in London, and he and I had a good chat, and I'm excited to dig a little deeper into some of the stuff you're doing at RunZero. You're a legend in this space. A lot of people know you, but for those who are new to the world of cybersecurity and vulnerability management, maybe a little background on HD Moore and some of the stuff you've done leading you to RunZero.
Sure. Like most of my career has been breaking into stuff or building tools to break into stuff. And so this is very much like my first job, where it's very much like we want to help people avoid that and not get broken into, but using all the same tips and techniques that I've been using for the last 25 years to break into things. Now using that for kind of the other side, which is how do we use the same discovery techniques that a pen tester would use, but use that to find vulnerabilities that you wouldn't otherwise find using traditional tools.
Yeah. Maybe some of the tools that teams would be aware of?
Sure, like in the early days I worked on Metasploit for a long time, so that was my baby. I ran with that from like 2003 to about 15 years later before I finally took a step back. And the great thing about Metasploit is people would say we handed out machine guns to children, but mostly we're trying to like democratize access to exploits and really push the disclosure and make it okay to publish an exploit. Because back in the early 2000s, it was kind of risky. Like you would be worried about going to jail or getting sued just by publishing exploit code. Now we don't think twice about it, but a lot of it's because we fought so hard on the Metasploit side to make it boring and make it just part of everything else we do here.
Democratizing exploitation reporting, I guess, basically disclosure. So the founding of RunZero, what was the catalyst behind that?
So I spent a lot of time like doing consulting work and then doing product work and back and forth. So after a long stint at Rapid7, about 6.5 years post Metasploit acquisition, I spent about a year and a half, 2 years just doing consulting work, like just going out there and trying to hack things again. Because like I don't feel like you can build a product unless you actually see the pain customers have. And one of the nice things about that job is like we would do the same customer every quarter, and it was like a huge merchant bank. They process 13 million credit cards every so often, like this massive organization, and they really care about security. And they care about security so much that they've got all this money, they're hiring these really great pen test teams, and yet we still broke in every quarter. And it was always a different thing every quarter. So I started thinking about it, like what is the commonality? How are attackers still able to break in even though you put every possible resource you could afford to put on these things? And it really came out to discovery. Like they didn't know about stuff, and we used what they didn't know to break in. So typically if their security team knows about a device, a product, a technology, a network, they can do all kinds of things to mitigate it, to secure it, segment it. But if it's something that's like not even on their radar, well, that is going to be the most dangerous thing in their environment. And we proved again and again on the pen test side, that's actually the easiest way into the organization.
Yeah, because they don't know. The exposure then is probably even greater because they don't have some of the mitigating controls in there. I want to ask you this, I'm curious. It's the early Metasploit days to kind of the Rapid7 days to now. I presume a lot of what you described in terms of boils down to not knowing and that not knowing being exploited. Have you seen other things that change though? Certainly environments change, move to the cloud in that time frame.
Yeah.
Obviously AI in this time frame. But in terms of organizations running the business and using technology from a pen test perspective, from a bad actor exploiting perspective, have things stayed consistent or have they changed over the years?
I mean, look at how bad actors are breaking in. It really hasn't changed much in 30 years. It's the same old, right? I mean, if you look at the management report for this year, looking back at last year, the top 4 initial access vectors that attackers used to break in for cases they investigated were all security appliances. It was Palo Alto, it was Fortinet, it was Avanti. So it's the same old firewall at the edge being compromised. Those are now the easiest point into the network. So in that sense, like it hasn't changed too much. I think what has changed though is how the industry has responded. Like the industry's not great at staying focused on one thing and doing it well. You can see folks over-rotating on AI, over-rotating on blockchain, you name it. And because of that, even with the cloud stuff, every security company found in the last 10 years, maybe except for RunZero, has started off saying we're going to go after the cloud. And our take is like, you know what, every chicken sandwich restaurant actually has a Kubernetes cluster inside. Like there's so much physical equipment out there, like if you're an organization that provides medical services or retail or manufacturing, like that's not cloud stuff mostly. There's cloud involved, but you still have to care a lot about on-prem. So this has kind of been a contrarian take of like, you still have to secure the basics, and we feel like most of the industry has turned an eye away from doing a good job in the basics, and now they're trying to sell you things you don't necessarily need while kind of leaving you exposed on the rest of it.
And so, in terms of, I guess, having a sense of what that world looks like operationally, and then from a risk management and vulnerability management perspective, I think a lot of organizations, you probably confirm this, think they know what to do. They're given a list of vulnerabilities, they're given a list of CVEs, they think they have the score, they think they have the context, hopefully the data to kind of drive the actions for their team to reduce the exposure, reduce the risk. What's your experience there? Maybe specifically kind of the CVEs in terms of how they're used. Maybe is that not enough to be used? So kind of paint that picture for us.
Yeah, I mean, as an industry, we over-focus on CVEs, and they are not necessarily the easiest ways in. Typically, folks are being compromised through misconfigurations, default credentials, just all sorts of other basic meat and potatoes type security issues. And yeah, CVEs are important for high-risk issues, but when a new vulnerability is announced, right? Let's say there's a new vulnerability in a Vanti product or a managed engine or something like that. What you're going to see instead is like exploitations going to be happening within days, not weeks, not months. And so it doesn't really matter whether you have if your security product doesn't need to tell you that it's unpatched. You already know it's unpatched in day one. So what we need to do instead is figure out where are those things, how are they exposed, do you have mitigating controls of them, do you know what happens if someone does break into one of those systems? And that's really where we've kind of falling short. It's like we've been so CVE focused that most of our IT and other mitigation resources are just chewing down these giant lists of things that could probably be solved through just normal patching. In reality, where folks getting breached tends to be these like 0-day, end-day, end-week type scenarios where they know about the vulnerability, but they're waiting for the next cycle of their vuln scanner, or they're waiting for the next remediation window, and that is the period where folks are getting compromised.
And so what's the answer there then? What in addition to, or what of, or within the CVE should they use, should they not pay attention to, and maybe is there something else that they should be looking at?
Our take is like CVE is nice just to have an identifier for a known attack, but it doesn't drive anything we do. Like everything we're focused on is like, what's risk, what's exposure, how can an attacker break in right this second? Not necessarily like, what CVSS score it has, what EBSS score, like that's a little bit less relevant on day one, day two, et cetera. So the biggest challenge that folks need to look at, and you're starting to see other vendors do it too, is that they've put so many resources into like the legacy kind of vuln management side, where it's just this big machine that every week churns out a new list of things to go do, that they don't have any resources left to defend against the real attacks, which are all the attacks at the edge, the perimeter, the configuration issues, things like that. So we're now seeing this like new wave of companies being started that just do like continuous pen testing, for example. And that's kind of like the other extreme. It's like, now we only care about pen testing, we only care about external side. And like our take is you gotta have that both. You have to know about all your stuff inside, outside. You have to know about all your vulnerabilities inside, outside. You have to keep up with the 0-day emerging threats, but you also need to make sure you take care of the bigger problems over time as well. So it's not really, you can't really just pick one side of the coin, you kind of have to do both.
So I have this grand vision that security has the knowledge to change the way a business runs, and then more specifically is built to run.
Absolutely.
And I often use the vulnerability management case as the story to kind of paint this picture, where I think, to your point of we've moved to continuous pen test and maybe not it. We haven't arrived at continuous vuln management yet, perhaps, unless we can learn more from what you're doing. But I guess the point is we're spending all these cycles on tools and processes and staffing teams to close the gaps and mitigate the risks associated with these vulnerabilities, when in fact all of that data could say, if you built the stack differently, or if you put some mitigating controls or did some segmentation or didn't collect this data or didn't do this function in this way, we could eliminate all that vuln management work and focus on actually growing that part of the business.
100%.
So, I don't know if you have thoughts on that. Is that a golden dream that they'll never happen, or do you see things moving that direction?
I mean, ideally, everything you put in your network auto patches, takes care of itself. You don't have to worry about, did I install the thing or not? It should just automatically do the thing, right? It should go to your centralized logging. It should have some sort of like management and monitoring, et cetera. Like, the challenge is we're still building new tools, building new products that don't even have the basics there. Like, every time a vendor gives you a virtual appliance, they're effectively giving you a bag of bits that are sort of rotting on day one. Like, they're not applying OS updates anywhere nearly as fast to that VM as you would apply them to your production systems. So almost by definition, all those things out there that are provided by a third party, whether it's firmware on a router, device, et cetera, or a virtual appliance, they're just out there slowly collecting technical debt and getting more and more vulnerable. And we can't do anything about that unless you actually fix the core problem, which is, like you said, build things that are defensible from the beginning.
Right. So have we moved the needle on that front?
A little bit. We're seeing like a company right now that I think they're cleaning out, they're making tons and tons of money for this reason alone, is ChainGuard. They effectively say, like, we will sell you other people's free software for lots of money, and in return we'll verify that it's probably not backdoor. Okay. And that alone is enough to drive an entire business right now. That just tells you how bad the scale of the problem is, that folks just want to like change the source of their data to be a third party, and they're willing to pay for that alone.
Just the backdoor. I was hoping you were going to say, and we harden it for you. But even just
just verifying like it hasn't been backdoored lately is
crazy.
Enough to make a ton of money doing it. So I think there's definitely something to be said for like having kind of a gold supplier of some sort. So when you can say, like, I'm going to source my components from you, you're going to make sure that they're secured, updated, et cetera. I believe ChainGuard does similar. They'll make sure like all your missing patches are applied to your images before you deploy them, things like that. So I don't know, don't want to talk about them too much, but I think it's an interesting model that they're effectively selling free software just for that kind of peace of mind aspect.
So what I do want to talk about is the creative stuff and the innovative stuff that you're doing with RunZero.
Yeah.
So give us an overview of what you built, how it fits into an organization's current security program, or they might be struggling with. We just work off the CV list and crossing our fingers. So how do you help them kind of move beyond that?
Absolutely. I mean, the first thing we have to convince folks is like, one, you don't even know about half your stuff. And we show that again and again. We go to an organization that's already using every tool we can imagine, and they say, we've got 10,000 devices here, and we say, great, you got 25,000, and you're only doing vuln scanning on 8,000 of them, and you only have EDR on 5,000 of them, and they go, well, crap, now we need to double our CrowdStrike license, now we need to double our vuln scan license. We're saying, no, hang on a second, like, let's talk about it a little bit more, because the vulnerability scanners are now only good at scanning machines where they can authenticate to. Like the old days of building a scanner where it has the attacker's eye perspective, like very few people were doing that. Like, we're doing that, of course. That's kind of our bread and butter, is unauthenticated discovery, scanning, vulnerability detection. But the legacy vulnerability management vendors have really gone all into authenticated agent-based discovery. Now that the ER vendors are also selling vuln management tools, like you see CrowdStrike, 701, other folks jumping into it, they're selling you the same thing, but they're selling it from the context of an agent on the machine. So they don't know whether it's actually exploitable, they don't know if it's reachable, and that's really the challenge. So like kind of a lot of what we do at RunZero is going back to the drawing board and saying, we need to do the amazing unauthenticated discovery, because when we report something we find through that mechanism, we know it's exploitable because that's how we found it, right? We're going to do the same perspective that an attacker would. So a lot of our innovation is, how do you take that unauthenticated approach into modern environments where things are really difficult to fingerprint, they're really difficult to like get information. All these machines are locked down so tight that it's an incredible amount of research just to figure out, is it running this version of Linux or not?
And so, don't give away the secret sauce, but how do you go about that? Because clearly, when you're walking in and they have double the machines, even they can't find them themselves. So how do you do this?
If you look at kind of the status quo, a lot of vendors bundle like the Nmap engine, and Nmap's fantastic. We love Nmap too, but Nmap will tell you like what the OS kernel is. It'll say this is Linux 2618. And so if you're running something like a vulnerability scanner and you use the normal OS fingerprinting, it's just going to tell you you've got a Linux box and it'll say a Linux server, what kind of hardware it is. We go the opposite round. We say like, this is a Roku media player, you're running this firmware version with these vulnerabilities and this kernel. So we do that just kind of top to bottom, layer 2 up fingerprinting, and we try to tell you what the physical hardware is itself, how old it is, what vendor manages it. Another really cool trick we can do is we can tell you whether the device is on more than one network at a time. So if we find a machine that's actually connected to multiple networks, we can determine that from one scan of one network only. And we have some really neat techniques there. On Windows platforms, for example, we use the DCRPC Octa2 resolver, and it tells us like all the secondary interfaces pre-authentication. So by looking at all your assets and then saying, let's make a unique fingerprint for everything, and see if we see the same unique thing in more than one place at a time, and then also using these direct tricks where we're able to query an asset and make it tell us about its secondary interfaces, we can tell you about all the places where your segmentation is broken. We can show you cases where a developer laptop is bridging your PCI CDE to your not CDE, or crossing wires in a network that's high security versus low security. We see that all day long. So it's that type of like really kind of down in the weeds, fiddly investigation that allows us to provide a lot more context about, is this asset important, how's it connected?
So that's an interesting scenario. So what's the, I don't know if there's a business case necessarily, or what's the IT operational case for a machine to be on multiple networks at once? And then clearly what's the what's the risk?
Yeah, I mean, typically it's often just accidental. Okay. So a good example, if you have a Mac laptop right now, and let's say you're connected to the Wi-Fi when you're running around between business rooms, and then you want to pull something out the file system, or it's kind of slow, so you connect your laptop to the cable. You are now a router. You are now connecting the wireless network to the wired network, and you're the bridge in between. What's also interesting is that the popularity of container tools like Docker Desktop, things like that, Docker Desktop turns your machine into a router by default. It actually turns IP forwarding on by default. So one of the things that RunZero does is, as we're scanning every machine in the local network, we actually ask the machine if it'll route packets for us. We can tell you, hey, this device is actually acting as a router or not. So it's really common for us to find cases where you think you segmented your networks, and then just some kind of accidental mess up basically allows an attacker to go from point A to point B. And the existing tools don't do a good job of even looking through that stuff, let alone reporting it.
And the CVE is not going to find that.
Yeah, nothing. I mean, it's very difficult to find that stuff because you have to be down in the weeds at the wire level. You have to be doing interesting discovery packets that leak secondary IPs, and it's a bit of a lost art too. I mean, security engineers these days generally cut their teeth on web applications and bug bounties. No one's really good at layer 2, layer 3 networking anymore, and we see that kind of in the skill base.
Right. And so your team obviously deeply entrenched in that world. How does what you uncover then change how they manage, or maybe even rebuild their security program to account for what you do?
The step one is like, what do you have? So we'll go to an organization and we'll say, like, here's the other half of the things you didn't know they had, and they say, well, crap, we need to start a program to deploy EDR on all these machines, or we need to segment this network because we're connected, our OT is connected to our IT, and we really don't want that connected this way. So we help identify all the problems that they can use to start really laying out like security in the network. And typically like doing that type of security remediation is more valuable than just making sure you've applied the Adobe Reader patch to your server. Like, that's one of the problems with typical vuln scanning. They'll say they don't really know enough about the asset's context to tell you whether vulnerability matters or not. So they'll say you've got an outdated PDF reader on your server. It's like, great, but no one's logging into my server reading PDFs. How is that relevant to my business? So what we try to do instead is, like, basically we'll import third-party vulnerabilities, but what we really try to do is give you the full context. Like, we know where your EDR is, know your MDMs are, we know how these can configured, we know where the vulnerabilities are, and now we can say, based on all these points here, these are your highest risk assets. These are the ones that are going to connect to your low security, your high security, that have vulnerabilities, that are end of life, out of date, et cetera. And it's a much shorter list to work from. You're looking at like a dozen findings as opposed to 100,000 findings, and we think those are the most impactful ways to not get breached.
I love it. So as we wrap here, and clearly we're just scratching the surface. I'm going to encourage everybody to connect with you and have meaningful, deeper conversations than I could have in this time that we have. But I want to touch on one more thing, where, I mean, you continue to get back to the community. You've done it for many, many years. Tell me a little bit about Project Discovery and the work you're doing there.
Sure. Yeah, there's an amazing company called Project Discovery. They actually do similar stuff to us. So technically they're kind of a competitor in that sense. They do ASM, do other things like that. But we love them very much because they open source all their tools. And the tooling, just like Metasploit was kind of the big force of open source security for a long time, the Project Discovery tool set, especially the nuclei scanner, is that now. Like, they are now the torchbearers for open source security going forward, and they do a fantastic job. They typically cover new vulnerabilities as they're being kind of identified faster than all the commercial vendors, and they give it to you for free. So at RunZero, what we've done is, number one, we've integrated our product with the open source nuclei scanners so we can use their plugins and templates, things like that. But two is we actually spend a ton of time going back and trying to help them make the product better. So we spent I spent most of my weekends for a couple of months helping re-engineer the concurrency of the nuclei engine itself. We're working on basically helping them with more vulnerability coverage, more protocols. We're looking at wiring in all the SH research I'm talking about at DEF CON into the nuclei scanner, so you can do shambles type scanning from nuclei. And it's just really nice to, like, one, work in open source again, but two, collaborate with another company where this stuff is we think it's valuable for everyone to benefit from this work, not just one company.
Back to your roots again.
Yeah, that's exactly, and it's a lot of fun, right? Working in the open is a blast.
Yep. And meaningful and necessary.
Absolutely,
so, congratulations on that and everything you're doing with RunZero. I hear a lot of good things, and it's always good to chat with you, HD.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate your time today.
Yep, likewise. And everybody, seriously, I can't go to the depth you can in the conversation, so do connect with HD and the team. Todd Beardsley as well I spoke with, and see what you can't see. Find what you can't find. That's the only way you're going to get through a meaningful vulnerability and risk exposure reduction program. Work with RunZero to do that. So thanks everybody for listening, watching. Stay tuned for more coming from Black Hats here in Las Vegas. itsreaction.com/BHUSA25. Thanks everybody later. Thanks HD.
Well, thanks, sir. Appreciate your time.